Good evening, Pipe Writer. How are you doing? Nice to meet you. Not sure if I've seen you on my channel before. Very nice. Thank you for coming back. This is the second attempt at doing this London calling. Last night's didn't quite work out, which we'll get to in a minute. Nice. I shall check out your channel. What is the significance of the name of your channel, Pipe Writer? You love pipes and typewriters, nice. I thought you were some kind of article writer on the topic of pipes and smoking. Interesting. There is a shop here in some of the malls which has... No, I'm getting mixed up with sewing machines. There was a shop in some of the big malls which have their whole front window covered in old vintage sewing machines. Hi, Pipe Puffer. Well, I guess typewriters are pretty much a thing of the past now, virtually. I guess any typewriter's starting to get a bit vintage. How many typewriters have you got? Really? Making a comeback? Interesting. Why is that? Too many. Where do you keep them? It's such a bulky hobby to collect. We all say that about pipes as well, that we've got too many, but the footprint of the typewriter will take up. You'll get about 30 pipes in there. Speaking about the pipes, I've prepared a load of packages to send out tomorrow, some of the pipes that I've sold, and I realised that I hadn't stamped them. So I've got to open them up again and get them stamped up. This is one which I made recently. And that one I sold to Pipes and Spirits. Came out quite nice, really happy with that. Not perfect by any means, but certainly a reasonable effort. What time is it in the US now? A lot of feedback, okay. I think it's rubbing against my cardigan. I'm just going to move it. Hang on. Thank you for letting me know. Alright, is that better now? Cool, thank you. 6:07. Sorry, I lost my track there, Pipe Writer. 6:07 means what? Oh, time-wise, right, okay, EST, yeah. 6:07, okay, so it's pretty early. So, anyway, so last night, the reason why I came on tonight is because I usually come on a Saturday night. But I did start a live feed last night, and as I was chatting live, I got a knock on my door, and my daughter is staying here. She's in the last few weeks of pregnancy, and she wasn't feeling well. She wasn't feeling well at all, and we ended up going to hospital, and she was there until about an hour or two ago. She was in there for probably about 15 hours just to see a doctor for 10 seconds. Sitting and waiting, lying and waiting for 15 hours just to be told, yep, you can go home. Yes, it was the NHS, but I'm generally quite complimentary when it comes to the NHS. They have a huge mammoth task, grossly underfunded, and I guess they do the best that they can. It's not to say that they're all great and fantastic, but generally speaking, we've had good experience, with the odd exception overall over the years. And the Labour ward was extremely busy this weekend, and they just had priorities, and she wasn't a high priority. They checked her, and basically they didn't know what the problem was, and they were thinking about doing blood tests and ultrasounds and so on. But in the end, when she saw the doctor said it's fine, you can go home, and that's what she did. So we went in. I took her in must have been about 1:30 a.m. yesterday, and I stayed with her till about 5:30 a.m. Her husband was with her until, well, most of the rest of the day. My wife went in the afternoon, and they came home. Must have been about, I don't know, 9-10 o'clock tonight. A long day. Yeah, she's alright, thank God. Alright, we're going to have a bit of HH Mature Virginia. Sadly, a discontinued tobacco. And I'm going to smoke it in a pipe, which I made, my first pipe that I made on a lathe. And I even drilled this myself on the lathe to take a 9mm filter, and drill was perfect. I was really happy with the way the drill turned out. I do need to get the drill bit in there just once more, because when I put the filter in, it needs a little bit more depth. You see there's a little bit of a gap there. And if you can see that, there you go. There's about a 2mm gap, which I need to close by drilling it a little bit more. Hi Suffolk, how are you doing? No luck with the French wheelers yet, but I did have quite a chat with what's his name, Frog something Piper in Australia. I forget his name. My conversation with him is on this phone, so I can't go off. But very interesting conversation, and I'm going to try and do more with files. See, my main issue is this area here, and that's something which I need to improve on. The rest of it is not perfect, but practice will get me there. But this is just technique, which I need to develop. The weather in London has been pretty bad. It's been wet all day. Hasn't been torrential or anything, but just continuous. you haven't missed anything. I just really wanted to get on today just to make up for last night for having to leave at short notice, and just to report that thankfully everything is well. Daughter is back. I had to leave early in midstream because my daughter wasn't feeling well and we had to take her to hospital. Snowing, wow. It's been pretty mild here, just very wet today, but overall quite mild. I think we're getting April showers in March. Oh, you're in Scotland. All's good. Wildcat, thank you for asking. Special Attica flake, that's good. Hi Nick, how you doing? I'm smoking some HH Mature Virginia in my self-made, I don't know what you want to call this, a pot I suppose, 9mm. I made this last week and it's already smoking very well. Hi Dale. She's doing well, thank you very much. She's back home and all is good. It was a long wait to get seen, but other than that, it's all okay. Homestead, how you doing, my friend? Smoking the pipe I made with you. I re-drilled it. I actually drilled it for 9mm. And it's smoking very, very well. I'm really happy with it. I do need to drill it a little bit more because when I put it together with the filter in, it doesn't quite meet. But it smokes really well. Very happy with it. The NHS overall, can't complain. I mean, as it turned out, as I mentioned earlier on, we got there about 1:30 a.m. Went straight up to the Labour Suite. Any smoking guns? We went straight up to the Labour Suite. And so we bypassed the accident emergency, went straight upstairs to the 5th floor of that hospital, and we got seen, well, put it this way, she got put into an observation bed fairly quickly, but she didn't actually get seen for a good couple of hours, and she was waiting for some painkillers because she was in a lot of pain and she didn't know what to do with herself. She was sort of rocking backwards and forwards 1 second, then resting on my shoulder another second, then getting up and walking another minute. She just couldn't keep still because of she was really uncomfortable. After about 2 hours, it was quite a long wait, they gave her some painkillers. Painkillers didn't really resolve it. It eased it, but didn't resolve it. And then they said that the ward was very busy, the labour ward, and they'd put her into a bed on one of the wards temporarily. They're not checking her in officially, but just so that she was more comfortable, which was nice. Put her in a bed. And they said the doctors would come round as soon as they could. The labour ward was very busy. That as soon as they could turned into 15 hours. Doctor came in. 2 seconds later, she was on her way home. So she waited 15 hours to speak to the doctor for 2 minutes. And the whole reason why she waited was to see whether they're going to do some blood tests and ultrasound. She said, no, you can go home. And that was that. So on the one hand, you think to yourself, well, was it worth the effort? Was it a waste of time? On the other hand, you think, you just can't be too careful. You know, she's in the last month. No, not the first time. I have a grandson and a granddaughter from my son. But this is the first one for my daughter. Earl Grey tea. Yeah, absolutely. In a way, I've just got to look at the positive and got to be grateful that it was on a weekend, so work wasn't disrupted really. My son-in-law, as it is, he does work a bit on the Sunday in the mornings. He had to take off today to be with his wife. But at least it was only a Sunday. Hey chef, how you doing? I was on Hector's Quaker Piper's live video a bit earlier on. He did a second feed after the drawing. And an interesting discussion ensued about free speech. Whether or not free speech, I haven't tried Diddle's one, no. This one is I'm not an attorney, although I've had a lot of legal experience when it comes to contracts and property leases, things like that. I've been working with those for probably 30 years. Although now I'm a photographer by trade. But I did work for many years in the property trade. In the real estate trade is what you'd call it in America, I guess. And about 20, 25 years ago, I had an estate agency where I looked after other people's properties. Sadly, none of my own. And photography sort of started as a hobby, and it just took see you, Suffolk, have a good one. Photography just took up more and more of my time, and eventually I sold my business. Business wasn't doing that great anyway. Sold my business and went into photography. But yeah, I've had a lot of experience with legal documents. I would say that I've been working with legal documents for around 30 years. I actually enjoy reading legal documents, especially the English ones here in the UK. They're so convoluted, especially the older ones. You see some of the older handwritten ones, those are amazing. And you have to have an extremely next Pipe Club is actually day after tomorrow, Tuesday. No, sorry, next Tuesday. My mistake. I lost my train of thought. What was I saying? Can't remember. Something to do with the legal business, but I don't remember what it was. Been up most of the night, so didn't get back till about 5:30 in the morning. Didn't get to sleep till after 6. Old documents, yes, thank you. Hi Voodoo Review, how you doing? Yeah, so some of the old leases, they go back hundreds of years. And, well, when I say hundreds, certainly we'll go back 100, 150 years, handwritten documents. And you could read... I'll come back to that in a minute, Dublin, otherwise I'll lose my train of thought again. But if I don't, remind me. Hi Matthew, thanks for joining. There are some documents that I've read which you have to be able to train your mind to go on for a long time. And what I mean by that is that there's, in leased documents, generally speaking, you don't have commas and full stops and inverted commas and italics and all of that kind of thing. In most legal documents, the sentences, you do have full stops, but often at the end of a very, very long sentence, and nuance and commas have to be placed by you in those sentences. And you have to sometimes train your brain to keep track for a long time until the end of the sentence to actually get the gist of what that particular clause of the document is saying. And it's actually a very good brain exercise, it really is. And I enjoy that. It does get tedious at times when you have to do it, but when you don't have to do it, it's enjoyable, like most things. The language is nuts, yeah. I mean, to give you an idea, the book that I read by George Herman for Danny Shaw, that gives you an idea, and that's just language from 50, 60 years ago. Here with 2 4s, herein before, herein after, notwithstanding the above, all of that kind of stuff. These are supposed to be good matches. They're useless. Truth is, for Orthodox Jewish people, when you go to a Talmudical college, which I did do for a couple of years, yes, Dublin. I went to a Talmudical college, and essentially, you're learning about the fundamentals, the foundations of legal argument. And it's studying the Talmud is one of the most taxing exercises that you could do for your brain. Extremely long-winded arguments, very intricate, very detailed, quite complicated, quite complex, often scientific, often mathematical, and it's really just something which really, really taxes your brain power. I love a good debate. I had one just, I was coming on to that before, as I was saying before, I was on Hector's live video, and we were talking about free speech, whether or not free speech should be an absolute right, or well, just generally talking about free speech. So Hector was saying that he thinks there should be no limitation to free speech, certainly not in advance. Retrospectively, perhaps. So, for instance, there's been a lot of talk about it in some of the political news about certain comedians, for instance, who were restricted in what topics they could talk about and who they could take the mickey out of in their sets. So some comedians who were invited to universities, they were told this topic you have to stay away from, that topic you have to stay away from, and you can't talk about them or them or them. And a lot of the comedians just said, fine, I'm not doing it. Yeah, Naked is absolutely right. And Hector was saying is that he thinks that's wrong, and he thinks nobody should be told what they can and can't talk about. But if they say something which is offensive, then certainly it can be talked about and discussed afterwards, but certainly people shouldn't be restricted in advance. And we got on to talking about racism and that kind of thing. Where do you draw the line? And one guy piped up, I'm not going to mention his name, and he made a very generalized statement about the Jewish faith. Not about the Jewish faith, about a practice, one particular practice in Jerusalem. And it kind of made my ears prick up, and the debater in me awoke. And it's interesting that when you do sort of, Hector was quite reserved about it, and he didn't want to get into it. I think he was worried that it would get into a bit of a slanging match. And I said, no, free speech. Hector, you're the one who's you're a proponent for free speech. Speak, let's have a debate. Let's have a polite debate, but a polite one. So I asked him, what's your issue? He was talking about, actually, the example is not really important. It's the fact that you look at a religion, doesn't matter which religion, whether it's Judaism, Islam, Sikhism, Buddhism, Christianity, it doesn't matter, it really doesn't matter. You can look at any religion, any culture, any creed, any minority, pick out a practice within that religion or group, and you could criticize it. You could say it's feminist, you could say it's misogynistic, you could say it's racist, you could say it's lots of different ists. But when you take one particular practice in isolation from any group and you say that's bad practice, I think that's just a very childish and very superficial attitude and approach to any kind of group. So the argument he was making was that the Jewish faith, the Orthodox Jewish faith, is misogynistic, and he gave an example. I'm not going to get into the example because that would actually just take away from the point that I'm making, because the point is it doesn't matter what the example is. When you take one example out of a whole practice, it's stupid. You can't have a balanced view of it. You've got to interact, you've got to learn, and you've got to understand what the culture is all about, what it stands for, and then you can see, and again, it doesn't matter which religion it is, any religion, any established religion, and you'll see that there's a balance, there's a structure to it. And whereas one aspect might be but it might apparently be, it might look to you like it's a pro-male, but it will have other aspects which are perceived as pro-female. So you might say that religion is feminist, or you might say that it's misogynistic. But you have to it's like saying that all Muslims are terrorists, or all Catholics are all paedophiles. You know, it's a ridiculous statement. It's certainly a statement which one makes with passion because people are angry about those sort of tiny minorities within those religions who set a really bad example. But it's a ridiculous statement to tie them all with the same brush. So he kind of got my back up a little bit, but through having that discussion, it gives you an opportunity to break things down a little bit, and also gave an opportunity to see somebody for what he really was, which was a racist. Now, I don't believe that he necessarily meant to be offensive and to be racist, but it's one of the topics which somebody talked about recently. I'm trying to remember who it was. I think it was Yardism, Chad. And he talked about, I don't know if it was Chad, maybe it wasn't, I don't remember. But sometimes when you're brought up in a certain culture, in a certain environment. You can be racist without intending to be racist. You can have, the word that I used was prejudiced, not so much racist, but people are prejudiced. Somebody gave an example. I don't remember where it was. Somebody gave an example and asked the question: when you're driving along the street and coming up to a stop sign, and you see somebody standing at the stop sign at the central reservation, depending on the type of person that you see there, do you lock the doors of your car? And I thought that was such a phenomenal question, such a thought-provoking question, in terms of your inbuilt prejudices. And the point that I was making was that with the progression of the generations, those prejudices, I believe, I might be wrong, but I believe that they are being diluted and the world is becoming a better place. Because today's generation is extremely permissive and it's extremely non-prejudicial, or at least put it this way, the political correct movement, if it's got anything to be proud of, is that it's just opening up different cultures. I think that's a bit of a dichotomy, because that's also a negative aspect of it, in my opinion. But certainly the fact that there's a culture of tolerance for anything and everything, again, that for me is ironic, because it's also a negative aspect that anything goes in this day and age. Would I say Judaism tolerates many minorities within its religion? I think that would be different. It depends. In every religion, in every culture, you have conservatives and you have extremists. And within the Jewish religion, there are lots of different levels. But when you say tolerate, I would say certainly Judaism tolerates minorities better than it used to. But I think that's a reflection of society as a whole. I think society as a whole, as I was just saying actually, society as a whole tolerates minorities better. And Judaism, because Judaism is based on Scripture, and Scripture provides a very prescribed lifestyle, therefore, by definition, it excluded many minorities. But having said that, I think that with the generations, Judaism... Let me make something very, very clear, actually. It's a very, very important point. To give an example, homosexuality, if you go by the strict edicts of the Bible, is not permitted. It's an abomination according to the Bible. But nowhere in the Bible does it say that you should offend, abuse, tease, ostracize, and be intolerant towards a homosexual. And the Jewish religion is full of homosexuals. There's absolutely no limitation to the variety of lifestyles within the Jewish religion, and the same applies to all religions. But I think that certainly in times gone by it was far less tolerant than it is now. There are a lot of sects in Judaism, yes. Dale. I think it's to some extent it's a form of tribalism. It depends, Sam. Hi, Sam. It depends on the perspective that you're coming from. If you're saying that in terms of their humanity, that all practitioners of any religion are just not nice people, not good people, then I wouldn't agree with that, no. Are there examples of those? Oh yeah, for sure. In all religions. But what I would say is that when you say that practitioners of any religion are small, fearful little beings, I think that the rigidity of pastoral and religious leadership. That's okay, Sam. I really enjoy these kind of discussions. I have no problem with people asking direct questions, and as long as they're not offensive, I have no problem with it. Well, they can be direct and perceived as offensive, but as long as they're not offensive in intent, then I have no problem with it. You know, I've always said that any person who goes through life and doesn't ask questions is just sort of floating through life like a zombie. You know, you're given a brain. Our brain is an extremely powerful tool, the most powerful tool on earth. And if you don't use it and you just sort of go through life zombified, then you are a zombie, essentially. And I believe that it's important to ask questions. Anybody who's religious and doesn't ask questions about his faith is stupid. So, Sam, to come back to your question, I think that there are a lot of... Let's set aside the bad apples. We're not talking about the pedophiles and the abusers and the racists and those kind of people. We're not talking about those and the crooks, okay? Because that could happen in any religion. But in principle, are all practitioners of religion small, fearful little beings? The way I see it is that they're struggling. The leadership of religion, of any religion and culture, in this day and age especially, more than any day and age in memory, in record, not in memory, I'm talking about thousands of years, but I think in this day and age, where, as I said before, anything goes, and I'm not criticizing anything goes, it's a state of affairs. I personally don't believe in it, but I'm not criticizing other people. People, you know, they do what they do, and that's great. As long as they're happy, that's the main thing. But I think that leadership of any type of group, in this day and age especially, is struggling with holding that group together. Some people might say that's a good thing. Some people might say, let's do away with religion, let's do away with cultures, and let's just be humanity. And I hear that, I get that, it makes sense to be a humanist. I personally don't believe in that. I was brought up differently. Were I not to have been brought up in the Jewish faith, I may well believe differently, but I'm a faithful person. Do I have questions? Of course I have questions. But I think that when it comes to the leadership, I think they are struggling. And when you see some leadership, some type of leader who fails his flock, he fails his community, or he's unable to interact, he's unable to find the way to inspire his community, it's because to some extent they're out of touch and they can't cope with the extreme openness of society. If that makes any sense, Sam. I don't know if that's what your question was. But. Hi, Scott-Free, how are you doing? Dale, are you a religious man, if I may ask, if you don't mind me asking? Well, I personally wouldn't agree with your statement. Not in well, I do agree with it, but not in itself. So Judaism does have a huge focus on family and ritual practice. Absolutely, many religions do. But where that focus on family and religion comes from, that's where our source of energy comes from. And that's from our connection with the Bible, the scriptures, and the interpretations thereof throughout the generations. And through that, our connection with God. And that's what it's all about. It's completely founded in our total belief in the Bible, in the Torah, being the Word of God, and therefore we believe that we are the servants of God. It's as simple as that. And our life here on this earth is to serve God in the best possible way, and to raise our existence as human beings on a material level to a more spiritual level, and to raise the profile of being godly. Dale, that level of there's like in any religion, there's huge differences of levels of observance. So for many people, Judaism is about that Friday night, getting together and maybe celebrating some of the festivals. And for some people, Judaism is their very existence. Everything that they do 24/7 is governed by the religion. Sam, I mean, that's your belief. Everybody's entitled to their belief, and if you don't believe in God, that's fine. Keeping the Sabbath is one of the fundamentals, one of the yes, Sam, you're right, that is the easy part. Faith is in some ways very, very easy. Some people would say it's a scapegoat and it's an easy way out, and where some people would say it's extremely hard. I've had this discussion with, I think it was with Stephen Cobbett of the Shire, or somebody, I don't remember who it was, but some people would say that being faithful is very easy. It's just simple. I believe. You don't have any answers. You don't deal with the questions. Hi Mike, how you doing? You don't deal with the questions. You don't deal with the real toughy questions, and you just say, I believe. And that's an easy way out. On the other hand, as I was saying before, if you're a thinking person, just saying I believe doesn't help. And it doesn't help you with those questions. Precisely, Sam, that you've hit the nail on the head. That's exactly what faith is. You either do or you don't have it. It's as simple as that. Oh yes, Wildcat, spot on. Despite your belief or non-belief, whatever it may be, and we have to be human beings. That comes. No matter what color or creed, culture or religion, background, country of origin, makes no difference. If you're not a human being, then you don't belong at the table. Yeah, it's really tough. It goes to the point that I was making earlier about not being able to deal with current society and not be able to deal with how some people cope with society and cope with the day and age that you find yourself in. Hi, Cap and Clench. Yeah, I mean, if you have a belief structure, then yes. Whereas atheists would believe that the rule of law and the rule of common sense and the rule of decency gives that person a moral compass. Throughout history, though, generally speaking, religion has been that moral compass. It has also brought havoc and destruction to the world in a ridiculous way. So oh right, Dale, because you said what we do to our own. So I thought you meant what people do within their own religion, how they treat people within their own religion. Hi Tree, yeah, she's doing good. She's back home and hopefully asleep. It was a bit of a marathon, but she's home. Sam, there's a lot of truth in what you say. Despite the fact that I'm a religious person, there is a lot of truth in what you say. Unfortunately, Dale, and Sam, I think you're right, and I think that's very sad. I think that religion, by definition, makes its constituents feel exclusive, and they feel that they have the moral upper ground, and therefore they become either evangelistic and want to convert everybody else and say, you've got it wrong, we've got it right, and if you don't listen, we're going to hang you. Could you just excuse me 1 second, please? Sorry. See you, Vidu. Just 1 second, please. Let's take a swig of that. Yeah, Dale, I understand your frustration with that, about the ostracization. And I would say I'd go back to where I was saying before, and I think that in earlier times, maybe 20 years ago, that was much more common. But I think the world is a much more tolerant place, and the same applies for the Jewish faith to some extent. And I would say that marrying out is certainly looked upon as one of the cardinal sins in Judaism. Listen, I'm not a rabbi. I'm not really qualified to have answers for all of these questions. They're really based on my own personal thoughts on the spur of the moment, so I can't say anything authoritatively. But that is a byproduct of a organized grouping. If you belong to a group and you disobey the rules, there are consequences. If there wouldn't be consequences, then the grouping couldn't hold. It's a simple rule of belonging. It's a simple rule of creating a supervised structure. And that's very sad, Dale. That really is very sad. And I say again, I think that the world is a much more tolerant place these days. I'm not talking about ultra orthodox people within their religions or extremists, but on average, you have in any religion you'll have extremists and people who take things too far. But on average, there will be a certain parameter. They might have all different levels of observance, but between certain parameters, even though there might be 10 sects within those parameters, but you could call them to some degree of normality. Beyond it, you'd say they're extreme possibly, but you could have still 10 different sects within the realms of normality, just practicing differently or at different levels. Well, I'll give an example of tolerance. My wife told me just today, that in the ultra-Orthodox synagogue, this past Saturday, the Sabbath, there was some kind of celebration, perhaps a birth of a baby or something, and she told me that a transgender woman, dressed in Orthodox attire, attended the synagogue. I don't know if there was any fallout as a result. She was a he previously, and he was a sibling or something like that of the person who had the baby, and so he came down from another town to join in the celebrations. And in previous years that would have been unheard of. If somebody was known to be a transgender person and would have come into a synagogue, they would have been turfed out. I'm talking about in an ultra-Orthodox synagogue. I'm not talking about in a Reform or Liberal synagogue. But in an ultra-Orthodox synagogue, that would never have happened 20 years ago, 15 years ago. Yeah, Dale. Unfortunately, it's these kind of things which do bring people together. It's a shame that it have to be a funeral, though. There is a lot more tolerance. I can certainly see it in my community, and my community is an Orthodox community, and there is a lot more tolerance. I see it in my own kids. I have a large family, and my kids have all so not all, but there's quite a variety of directions that they've taken, and they're all equally loved, and they all feel part of the community. They don't feel marginalized in any way. And they can interact with the ultra-Orthodox just as well as they can interact with a non-Jewish person, and I really do think that there is more tolerance. Hi, Pipe and Pirate. Yes, Dale. It really took me back, that story. I was really surprised to hear it. And what that does show is that even if, based on your religious belief, you personally don't believe in something, it has no bearing on your interaction with them as a human being. And you cannot force your belief on another person. It's as simple as that. You believe what you want to believe, you go along your life happy-go-lucky. But everybody else has exactly the same right to go along as happy as go lucky as you, in the way that they choose to do it. Dale, you know me. I love a good debate. I love a good deep discussion. Bring it on. Interesting thing is that when I first started this channel, I always said that I would never talk about politics and religion. Somehow it seems to crop up almost every day. What would I like for dinner? Depends on the mood, really. But my favourite thing to say always used to be roast chicken and roast potatoes, or a nice bit of steak. Although I haven't really had the taste for meat recently so much, but chicken, I really enjoy chicken a lot. I don't know what that means, Sam. Zoloft, I don't know what that is. Sandro Fazzolari. How are you doing, my friend? All is very well, thank you. I'm still smarting over the loss of that club pipe a couple of months back. Smoking some mature Virginia, by the way, and smoking it in the pipe I made last week on the lathe. 9mm. Feel free to give other people tobacco on my channel. Where's my tobacco? Just kidding. You've got more than enough, thank you. But Tree is an excellent person to send tobacco to. I haven't got started with this one yet. I made this one as well last week. Bit of a chunky, high CW, chunky looking pipe. I really intended for this to be quite a rustic looking pipe, and this sort of top rustication I was trying to copy Jake Hackett, what he does with a lot of his pipes, but it's not quite there. But it's a really nice, I just like the feel of it. It's got a lovely round bowl and it just sits in the hand very, very nice. I've got like a two-step process on these. What I found was that if I used the normal abrasive, it would get caught in the rustication, and you'd end up having a lot of sort of powdery residue. That I wouldn't mind doubling. I'm struggling with these matches. I've been using, to really good effect, if I can find them, matches from the Danish Pipe Shop, and those are really good. I don't know, I finished the box, I'm not sure, I can't see them around. Oh no, here they are. But I haven't really been buying from the Danish Pipe Shop since they stopped exporting tobacco. And I'm not really buying pipes that much, seeing as I'm starting to make my own. So I haven't really, but I do need to make an order with them, because the last edition of Pipe and Tobacco magazine has been released, and that's it. The magazine is closing down. Very sad. Bye, Sam. Thank you for joining. I enjoyed our discussion. Anyway, so you get this powdery residue sitting in the cracks, which is really hard to get rid of afterwards. So what I tend to do is, because I'm using the lathe now, and I attach I can attach the mops to the lathe. So what I do is I turn the lathe to full speed almost, so that the mops become rigid when they're spinning, really hard. And I load up the mops with the abrasive. I also started using different abrasives now, and I'm kind of experimenting with what works the best. I don't remember the name of it, but I'll try to remember to send you a picture of it. It's a yellow abrasive, and I use a brown one for the initial, and that really helps to bring out the grain. It helps to smooth off the briar, and it brings out the grain. And then I use this yellow one, and what I do is, as I say, I load it up when the mop is really rigid, so it's spinning really fast, which makes it rigid. And then when I apply it to the pipe, I turn it right down to virtually to zero, and it's literally just chugging along really slowly. And that's on a very soft linen mop. So what happens is that you get this mop which is really soft, and it's kind of caressing it. You don't have this, I don't know how to explain it, right. If you imagine that's the mop, okay, and you're just putting your pipe along the mop. When it's at high speed, it's rigid like that, and you hear that zzz, like that when you're applying the pipe to it. But when it's when you have it really slow, it's almost like just like that. You know, the different leaves are just caressing it. And what I found, it was that applies the abrasive very gently. It still gives you the sheen, but it doesn't leave any residue. So I do that yellow one first, and after that I do carnauba wax, and I apply it exactly the same way. I apply it to the mop at high speed and apply it to the pipe at very low speed, the lowest I can do, and it works really well. It gives me a really nice shine. And there is a particular polish that I want to get from Axminster, which I saw when I was there, but they didn't have any in stock, it's kind of an amalgamation. It's a blend of carnauba wax with something like that yellow abrasive, and it kind of gives you the best of both worlds. And it's supposed to be fingerprint resistant, because what you do find is with carnauba wax, with any finish, is that it doesn't last. You know, when you're holding it and the warmth of your hand, it kind of smears it, and it dulls the sheen. And I'm trying to get to and I know there are some pipe makers where the sheen stays for a very long time. It's almost like a plastic layer that they add to the finish of the pipe. The wax that I got the last order from, I don't remember is it the polishing shop? The polish shop. I'll have to, if you hang on, I'll do a search on my emails and I can tell you, because they're actually phenomenal. It's the biggest range of abrasives that I've seen. Right, it's called The Polishing Shop. I think it's thepolishingshop.co.uk. There you go. And they've got a huge range of polish. And they have some special orders as well, special deals, stuff which is sort of discontinued. But I've bought several different types. Oh, here we go. I can actually give you the thing. The polish. Sorry, I've hit the mic again. So this is actually my order. The one that I used before the Carnauba wax is the P175 yellow Menzena half bar. Well, you can get a full bar, half bar, whatever size you want, but that's the one I used before the Carnauba wax. Aha, the bottom 95% has just joined us. Where's Josh? Where's Pipe Grump? Because he will say there's a conspiracy afoot. Both Hector and Andrew Sirigliano have been far too lucky than should be allowed. Oh right, of course Hector, of course. I'm the bottom 95%. Quite right. Thank you for correcting me. Russell. Chucky, anyone? I know, Hector. Everybody is at the bottom 95%. No, Northern Bohemian is the 101%. He's above us all, isn't he? Hector, you missed a little bit of a deeper conversation before. I was going over part of the discussion we had earlier on. I haven't decided whether I'm going to smoke this one or not. Can't decide. It's that arrow on your head tree. It sends it all over. Dublin, you said something before about photography. What was it? Ooh. I just did a retrohale on this mature Virginia, and it's not usually a tobacco which I relate to as a peppery smoke, but that retrohale was really quite sharp. Yes, Tree, you almost had some thought the other day with words like wet and moist in your video the other day. I don't think Mrs. Tree was too impressed. Anyway, about photography, Dublin, I think you were saying something along the lines of it being a pressurized situation, stressful situation. And I find, for the most part, that it's only stressful, for me anyway, for two reasons. Number one, if I'm not organised. And number two, if the family are just not very agreeable people. And when people throw you off your game, it's sometimes very hard to stay on your game. And that's really takes practice and takes tolerance, as we were saying before. Yeah, as I was saying, it's for me, it's usually only a nightmare if the people are disagreeable and just looking for trouble, or if I myself am not organised. So, for instance, if I've got a wedding and for whatever reason I haven't charged all my batteries up, and I've always got some batteries, but sometimes they'll die off quicker than I like, and I always have a charger with me and I'll be charging batteries. But sometimes I'll find that my hardware lets me down, a cable lets me down, or something like that, or the camera suddenly decides to say, I'm having a rest now, which can happen, even with high-end cameras. That definitely sends you on a spiral, no question about it. And if you have people who are disagreeable, that's almost impossible to handle. And for me, that's one of my biggest challenges, which thankfully overall people on the happiest day should be a happy day. Generally people are quite amenable, but sometimes they're not. I had that once, not so long ago, probably within the last 6 to 8 months. I had a wedding where the father of the bride had married twice. So his first wife wasn't there, but he had children from his first wife, children from his second wife, and his second wife. And the second wife was extremely, how should I say it? Well, number one, she thought a lot of herself. And one of the ways that I know that in any wedding is when not the bride, but somebody in the generation above that wants you to take a set of photos of them on their own. I know that I've got somebody who's somewhat conceited and not always, but sometimes. So you've got the bride, who is the star of the day, the bride and groom. And this particular second wife of the father of the bride, she wanted me to take a whole bunch of photos of her on her own, which is, in my experience, in the circles that I take pictures, is quite unusual. No, nothing wrong with it, and I'm happy to do it. But usually the focus is on the young couple. And of course you take photos of the parents and the whole family and all of that, but to take a photo of the mother of the bride, or in this case the stepmother of the bride, was on her own, and to do a whole set was just a bit unusual. And anyway, so this woman was, every pose that I did, no Dale, she wasn't, thankfully, but whatever pose I did, she wasn't happy, and she says, doing it this way, do it that way, do this. And she would tell, when I'm posing people, she would just tell the people to do something else while I'm in the middle of posing and constructing a picture. And that, more than anything, puts me off my stride. because when you're doing a wedding, you've got, once the wheels start turning, you get through your set, you got to get this picture, that picture, and you try to do certain poses and you try to be creative, and every single photographer has their own way of doing things. And when somebody tells you, I remember once I went to a meeting, a pre-wedding meeting, and the mother of the bride brought out a wedding album from another photographer for a previous wedding from one of their other children, and said, look at these photos, I want you to do photos like this. I said to her straight away, respectfully and very politely, I'm not interested in what another photographer does, because as soon as you tell me do this, do that, you want me to mimic somebody else, I'm not going to be comfortable. I'm going to be out of my comfort zone, and I'm trying to copy somebody else's art. You can't do that. Every person has their own style. And when it came to it on the day, she allowed me. She was actually very gracious. I did the wedding the way I wanted to do it, and she was very happy with it, and I've done more than one wedding since then. So she was obviously happy. But this other wedding that I was talking about earlier, she really put me off my game. The key is patience and keeping calm. Many times after I finish the whole family photo set, a more reasonable member of the family will come up to me and say, you did fantastically well, I don't know how you kept your composure. And that's really that's the trick, is keeping your composure. That is it. That is the bottom line, is keeping your composure, keeping a good sense of humor. And that's very hard sometimes, because when they put you off your game, it's very hard to be humorous. Part of getting nice photos is to be humorous, get the smiles, and sometimes when I'll get sometimes a bride or a groom, often the groom, because the men tend to be quite cocky sometimes, not always, and because they themselves are quite rigid and they're not relaxed and they're not having a good time, so they're not smiling, then it's not coming naturally. And the groom will say to me, make me laugh, say something funny. And I'll say to him, I'm sorry, but I'm not a comedian, I'm a photographer. But when you're dealing with people, and it's really a reflection of his own sort of state of mind at that time. I don't blame him, because it can also be a nerve-wracking day, and you don't know what goes on behind the scenes. Many weddings are an absolute pinnacle of a frenzy of activity leading up to the wedding for months, where it could have been the biggest, most stressful situation they've ever had to handle. And this wedding day is the pinnacle of that. And all those emotions, all those stresses, all those anxieties suddenly come to sort of a peak of activity all on that one day. And sometimes it can explode. So sometimes the grooms can be quite stressed. And when they sort of say, make me laugh, or something like that, it does also throw me off my game. So what I do in order to counter that is I will always make it my business to meet them before the wedding. Have a nice sit down, cup of coffee, and just have a chat with them, and just break the ice and get to know them a little bit. It does wonders. I would recommend that to any photographer, not just the professional meeting where you're doing the sell and you're trying to get the job. I do that. That's usually when they get engaged and when they're booking all the providers for the wedding. But I'll meet them again 2 or 3 weeks before the wedding, and that meeting just gives you dividends no end, because you're not meeting them fresh on the day for the first time. And usually I'll also help them along with their arrangements as well if they haven't got a particular wedding organizer. For instance, a lot of the weddings that I do don't have organizers, so a lot of that they'll take a lot of advice from me as the person who's kind of central to the activities throughout the day, and that helps. That really does help. But yeah, I mean, I can see why it would be stressful, but the key of it is being organized, and being anxious is a good thing. I always say this, that if you go to a wedding and you're not apprehensive, it's not a good sign. It's, you do have to be apprehensive, because you've got to know that you've got a task at hand and you've got a function to perform. And if you go into it feeling cocky, oh, I've got this, no problem, it's just a walk in the park, it's those ones that you got to worry about. But it is a hard day's work, I'll give you that. You earn your money, no doubt about that. And that's just the day of the wedding. Working on the photos after the wedding actually takes me a lot longer than the wedding itself. When I'm processing a wedding, I can take a week over it. Because I can't do it continuously, because you can't just keep looking at the same pictures hour after hour after hour. So I usually spend 2 or 3 hours a day for a week and a half, and that will usually produce some nice results. This is a picture I processed, I think it was just today or yesterday. A nice, attractive looking bride. Good evening, Mike at Briar Blues. Well, actually, most of the weddings that I do are Orthodox Jewish weddings, and they're a lot longer than that. Thanks, Joe. Yeah, but you'd be amazed what the original picture looked like. The original picture didn't look anything like that. It's about, processing and knowing what you can do with your software. See if I can show you something similar. Okay, hang on a second. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to save that image, and then I'll show you what the original looked like. So that's the image as it is now. And originally, that's the, hold on. So that's the original image, and if you're getting close, I don't know if this is interesting or boring for you guys. I'll stop if you're not interested. You see, if you're looking close, quite rough skin, but then when you process it, you desaturate, crop in a little bit, and that just smooths things out, just gives it a nice dreamy look, and yeah, just makes them look good. There's another similar one. It gives a nice kind of dreamy feel to it. Out of focus foliage in the foreground. You see, that's what I was talking about, getting that smile. Something like that. Nobody is just going to give you that smile when you say smile. And that's all to do with your interaction with the person on the day. That's an unbelievable smile. And I can't say that I always get that. She was a particularly fun bride as well. Lots of poses, no shortage. Well, her family probably would have originally been Eastern European, probably from Russia, Ukraine, that kind of region originally. Dale. Her makeup is demure, and you're seeing it through a phone, the lens in the phone, on a screen, you know. In the words of Robin Williams' brother in Mrs. Doubtfire, "Oh, you're such a bitch." Not often you'll hear me say things like that. A phenomenal movie, by the way. An actor sorely missed. Favourite ball size? As much Frosties as I can hold. Favourite ball size? Honestly, I don't know. I'm not one of those who, people talk about tall, thin, narrow bowls for flakes and wide bowls for latakia, things like that. I'm not a big, I don't get into that in any kind of deep way. I just know that I enjoy smoking some things in some pipes. Not always sure of the reason why. Hi Art, how you doing? The only thing that I do yes, true, they are great. The only thing that I do notice, which I have said before, is that a wide bowl is good for latakia blends. But in terms of Virginias, I haven't noticed the difference in tall, thin, wide. Virginias, some people talk about fold and stuff method, some people rub it out completely. Everybody has their own way of doing things, and I personally prefer just gently rubbing out, leaving quite sort of largish chunks in there. Something in the way amphora, if you know your amphora blends, the way the amphora is presented is quite sort of chunky. It's rubbed out, but it's quite chunky, and you can see that it's from a flake form. And that's how I like to rub out my flakes. Hi Art, yes, thank you. Thank God my daughter is well, and hopefully fast asleep in the room next door, or just down the hall anyway. Smoking the Ghost. A large bowl for me is, although I do have some pipes which have large bowls, overall it doesn't make a lot of difference to me because I don't fill my pipes. I only usually have about half a bowl at a time, for a number of reasons. Number one, because I'm quite fickle and I like to jump from from one tobacco to another. But the main reason is that, which most of you will have experienced, is that as you get halfway down the bowl, the flavour goes and you start to get a bit ashy, a little bit sharp. So I'd much rather have 2 half bowls than a whole bowl. Cheers, Dublin. Have a great one. Have a good week. You can't go wrong with a Savinelli, generally speaking. I think I've only got one at the moment, but I did go through a time when I had quite a few. The 320 has a really strong following. I have tried the 320, but I didn't like it. With the 320, I find that if you look at the 320, this fat area of the stem starts around there on the 320, and I find sometimes that it affects the way it sits in my mouth, that you're kind of hitting that wide area and the end of your lips kind of really starts to detect that thickness, and I just don't like that. But that could just be me, I don't know. Or maybe it was just the 320 that I had. People absolutely adore the 320. All right, any other questions, gentlemen? There is a video on my channel about my coffee. It's no great secret. I've mentioned it many, many times. It's just simple coffee, normal granulated coffee, freeze-dried coffee, about half a cup of the coffee. Then I have a milk frother, and I will fill the rest of the cup with frothed milk, and I will then top it with chocolate powder. And that's it. It's very easy to make if you have a frother, and it's absolutely delicious. It makes it so much more creamy, and it's just enjoyable. Sandro, I defer to your experience and knowledge. I don't know the answer to that. I don't know why coins would be any different to flakes when you get to the stage of loading your pipe. Pipe sales are going okay. I've sold from the video. I've sold I think 3 or 4 pipes so far. Actually, quite surprisingly, some of the high-end ones have gone, which I was really surprised, which I'm very happy about. Yeah, I'd like some more to go. I think the first one to go was the Moretti. I think that was the most expensive pipe in the video. The Bulldog. I'm just finding, the truth of the matter is I only just recently got that pipe, and it's a stunning pipe, and ordinarily I would have smoked it. But I'm just getting to a point now where, because I'm making my own pipes, I'm really focusing in more on the smoke rather than the pipe. And if I look at my own pipes, they're so inferior compared to the other pipes that I've got. But because I'm making them myself, obviously there's a sentimental value to it, and there's a certain amount of satisfaction to smoke your own pipe. And therefore, it's more about the tobacco and the smokability of the pipe it was getting to that point anyway before I started making pipes. You know, you get to that point after a certain amount of time in your journey, and I definitely slowed down my purchases anyway. You know, if I compare the amount of purchases I've bought in the last 6 months compared to any 6-month interval previously, I'd only bought a fraction of pipes compared to then. I've said this before, I'm not really an addicted collector. I'm addicted to the hobby, and I'm addicted to the exploration of the hobby, and hence the turnaround and turnover of my pipes as I explore and find what I do and don't enjoy. But in terms of collecting, I don't have drawers and drawers and drawers of pipes. And I like to try to keep the pipes that I smoke. And that's why you'll see on my desk the pipes that I smoke, generally speaking. I was always quite amazed, Mike, at how your collection, your own rotation was really quite small. And I wasn't sure whether you were trying to project a certain style of smoking pipes, but because you have access to probably hundreds of pipes, maybe you're smoking them but not kind of having them in your rotation. But I see that with consistency that those are your pipes on the table or in the rack behind you, and I've always been quite intrigued by the size of your collection. Somebody's just sent me an e-check. Let's see what that's all about. Oh, okay, I can see that. Somebody's gone for the Millville. Nice. Tree. My pipes all do rest. I'm not as good with cleaning as I used to be, but I will generally, unless I'm out and about and I've only taken one pipe with me, which is quite rare, I usually take at least 2 pipes with me. But generally speaking, my pipes will have at least a day or 2 between smokes. There's enough pipes in the rotation to allow me to do that. See, somebody who smokes 2 or 3 times a week, it's not really an issue. But I smoke probably, depends, you know, some days it can be really few. Today I think I've only had 2 half bowls. I think I had one this morning, because things going on in the family. Just haven't had the opportunity, but I think I had one this morning and one now, which was this mature Virginia. But somebody who smokes regularly and they've got a small rotation, you know, their pipes won't rest as much. And to be honest, you know, the old codger style of smoking was, you know, certainly you come across on eBay and things like places like that, you'll come across pipes which are so caked up. I did a restoration on a Peterson a while back, which the video is on my channel, where I literally had to take a drill. There was no point using a ream tool. I had to take a drill and drill out the bowl because it was literally, there was about that much tobacco chamber left. It was caked up to that extent. And that would have been just smoked and smoked and smoked. And people, certainly in England, they used to smoke a pipe, just smoke it continuously, and when it was, you know, completely caked up, they just toss it and start another one. Pipes 1 and 2. Hang on, and I will tell you. I did put sold next to any pipe that's been sold. So I have tried to update it fairly religiously, and I think I'm up to date with that. Hang on just a mo. Well, number 1 now has gone because somebody's just sent me an e-payment for it, so it'll take time to clear, but I'm gonna put that on hold, that one. pipe 2, I believe, is still there. I think somebody has inquired about it, but I've been very clear that a pipe is available until it's paid for. So I have done in the past holding pipes for people, but I'm not doing that because last time I did that and I lost out on sales as a result. Yeah, I've seen the hedgehogs, but you've got to be careful with the hedgehogs that you don't scratch the briar if you get too close to the bowl edge. Mark, hi. You pay, if you have a look on the video where the pipes are, if you look down in the description, there's a very clear description of how to pay. But it's really simple. You got to just add the shipping depending on where you are, and the pricing is there in the description. And just send it to my email address, which is boscopiperuk@gmail.com. Friends and family, and just say the pipe number, and then you can email me separately to the same address and send me your details. I'm just going to put my email address up here to make your life easier. Yeah, tree, absolutely, yeah, you're right, sorry. For heavy cake, that's going to do it better than the standard traditional reamers. I must be honest, I do find reaming to be very tedious because it's okay if you only want to take off sort of a 0.5 millimeter or something like that, but when you've got a really heavily caked pipe, you really want something to strip it quite quickly, and the hedgehog will do it better, I guess, than a ream tool. Been smoking this quite a bit recently. This is Mac Baren Burley London blend. This is from a really old tin from the 1970s, but I'm so not a Burley fan, but I've been enjoying this. And I almost opened a tin last night when I started the London Calling of Edgeworth. This one here, Mike, you might know about this one. I don't know if it's any good. I know that the Edgeworth Slices is reputed to be very good, but I think this is something altogether different. Executive Mixture. I picked this up in the Israti sale. It's quite an old tin. I don't know when it will be from. But this one, it says it's a mild blend of the finest white burleys, golden flake and rare red Virginia Cavendish for easy packing and free burning, specially blended with no aromatics to ensure coolest smoking and a delightful taste of natural tobaccos. And I don't want to open something if I'm not going to enjoy it. But I guess, how do I know? Peace, Palette, how you doing? Execution Mixture. Well, the anti-smoking lobby would say it's that. Mystic 860. Yeah, I think I'm going to do another video. I'm going to try and make it not as long as that one. I've done another pipe on the lathe since, and it went considerably quicker. But that particular pipe, what I did was, so obviously that, because it was initially under drilled, the bowl, I couldn't find the draft hole. So I kept on pushing the draft hole because I did the bowl first. So I pushed and pushed and eventually went past it. So when I eventually I drilled the bowl further down, I hit it, it was central, but I'd obviously gone past the what do you call the opposite of the apex? Anyway, I'd gone past it. So essentially I had like a T-junction. The draft hole went all the way across, and the bottom of the bowl was somewhere in the middle there, but the draft hole went past it. So what I did was I took when I was smoking a cigar, I just ashed the cigar into the bowl, and using a pipe cleaner, I just kept on ramming it and compressing it and compacting the ash into that hole, and really just became so hard, it's almost like wood in there, and it's been fine. It's as if there's no hole there, so it works really well. The Nadir, thank you, tree. But I'm kind of, after sort of using the lathe, I'm not sure yet if I'm regretting buying a wood lathe and not a metal lathe. But I think most people start off with a wood lathe, and I suppose when things move up a gear and financially it makes sense to do so, to invest in a metal lathe, because the precision that you could work with is just so much greater. Yes, user, it is indeed pipe mud. But for instance, with making the where is it? Was it with this? No, it was with the other one. Making the tenon. So this is the a little glue on the tip of the cleaner. Don't know about that. So this is the one that I did afterwards, which went quite a bit quicker. I was very lucky with the grain on this one. It's got lovely grain. Yeah, but I wouldn't want to put wood glue in the bowl. I mean, it'd be okay on the shank and things like that, but I don't think I'd want to be putting it in the bowl where it could somehow conceivably get affected by the smoking. That's just me anyway. But this one, again, this junction here is an area which I really need to work on big time. And I gave it a kind of a sort of a sunken in stem, but this one here was the first tenon that I made with the tenon cutter from Vermont Freehand, and it took a bit of trial and error. In fact, this is the second stem that I got to. The first one I wrecked, but it's as precise as I can get. But if I had a metal lathe, I think life would be a lot more precise. So that was the drill on that. And the drill on this is phenomenal. Even if I say so myself. This one is not 9mm, no. Look at that. And there is the other end, bang in the middle. This one I gave a whoop of delight when it when I drilled this. It just smack center. A beautiful drill, and considering this is my second pipe, I was over the moon. The second pipe that I made on the lathe. Other pipes that I've done would have been in some way part done when I got it, so possibly pre-drilled, or stem already made, that kind of thing. So this one I did also a bit of a chamfer on the outside and on the inside. It's the first time I've done that. So it's all a learning process. But I've, after talking to Bullfrog Pipes, had a long chat with him on Instagram, and I think I'm going to hold off on the selling for a while. Put it this way, if somebody likes a pipe and wants to buy, I'm not going to say no. But I think for now, I'm going to just really focus on taking my time and honing my skills, rather than rushing to get a pipe out there so that I can sell it. And whilst I don't have to get an income from selling pipes. I'd rather take my time and develop my skills. And when it comes to a point in time where perhaps I want to make an income from it, whether perhaps if I semi-retire or retire, get to a point where it would be important for me to make some money out of it, I hope that I'll have had enough time and experience under my belt that I'll be able to do that. Good evening, Ken. How are you? In terms of bowl coatings, some of them I have. This one's had some stain on it. I'm very well, thank you, Ken. Thank you for asking. Tired, but well. Haven't had much sleep last night. But this one here has no staining as such. This one is just the abrasive that I use. I use a 2 or 3 stage abrasive and the waxing, which just brings out the grain enough to make it really nice. You know, I could go for a higher contrast by doing a black stain, then sanding it and so on, but that needs practice as well. I have done that on some pipes, but it needs practice, and I've been overall happy with this natural grain. I think it really looks good, it looks natural, it looks original, you know. So I've been happy with that. Put it this way, I'm happy with the progress. I'm not happy with the pipes, but I'm happy with the progress. I'm not unhappy with the pipes. Each one I can see is getting better at certain aspects. This junction here on this one is, you know, the smoothest of all my pipes that I've made so far. But I've still got a huge amount to go. Just getting the feel, the sanding, you know, that kind of thing, and just, you can see there that the line there is a bit wobbly. But that junction is good. I'm happy with that junction. Freehand is also a way which I think that I have to focus on the classical shapes initially. But getting a shape, I mean, put it this way, even the classical shapes to some extent are, you can't call them freehand, but the sanding, the shaping of the pipe, when you're on the lathe, you can only go so far with the lathe, and then you've got to shape the rest of it. So there is a certain degree of shaping there. Well, not a certain degree, a very big degree, significant degree of shaping. And you can see there, this junction here is not the best. I gave it a little bit of a flat bottom so it would sit. Also some reasonable grain on this one. I part rusticated it. And I'm delighted that it smokes really very well. I was worried that because the shank is really quite narrow, because I originally, this was the one that I did on the video, and originally it was a regular drill, not 9mm, and I decided to make it 9mm, and I was really nervous that I would mess it up because it made the shank walls very, very thin. But thankfully it went smoothly. I mean, it is very thin over there, especially where I flattened it out. But if you look at some of the Dunhill ones, for instance, the Dunhill 9mm pipes, they're quite similar in, you know, can be quite narrow. I am nervous because this fit is quite tight, and I am nervous that it will crack. I think that's a very, very distinct possibility. Thank you, Peace Pipe Man. Appreciate that. Similar kind of rustication on this pipe, which I did, and which I've sold now. And it was all packed up, ready to go, and I realised that I hadn't put the initials on there, which I do want to do. So I've taken it out again. And this one as well, I'm trying to remember, there was a bit of a stain on this one, I think. So there we go. Gentlemen, I think that's enough for one evening. Tomorrow is a normal day, so I've got to get up at a reasonable hour. Wish you all a wonderful week. I hope you've had a good weekend. an enjoyable weekend. Mike, when is the your video going up on number 4? Oh, somebody did ask me about these, about using these on the on my tobaccos. I'll be honest, as a general rule, I don't use them. But this particular tobacco is a little bit dry, and I just keep it in there. But I'll be honest, I'm not even sure that it makes any difference. I don't know why. I don't find that they work very well with pipe tobacco, but that may just be me. And I suppose it's not in an airtight environment. That doesn't help. So, thank you everybody. Thank you user Scream Name. Thank you Smoking Gun. Thank you Joe. Thank you Dale. Thank you Peace Pipe. Thank you Pipe Writer. Thank you Ken. Thank you Jeff Linsicom. Thank you very much. If I didn't say hello to you, Jeff, sorry about that. Didn't notice your name pop up. But thank you for joining. Much appreciated. Road Glide Sally. Thank you very, very much for your beautiful thoughts. I appreciate it, and for your prayers. Very, very much appreciated. Certainly seemed to have worked. She's doing well. Hopefully fast asleep in bed. So thank you very much for that. Much appreciated. Mystic860, thank you for joining. Tree. Briar Blues. CW Piperman, if you're still there. Mark Wesley. Sandro, if you're still there, thank you for joining. And everybody else. Art, if you're still there, thank you. Have a wonderful week. Have a prosperous week, a healthy week, and above all,